Entering the medical field will bring up challenges that will include cognitive aspects, handover, and communication between clinicians and AI systems, situation awareness, and the impact of the interaction with patients. The use of AI in patient care can offer significant benefits. However, is there enough independent evaluation considering AI in use? Let's hear from Dr. Tan. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Tan again, and I'm happy to share today on the topic on the importance of human factors in medical AI. I heard a lot of the previous speakers mentioning about AI, and the healthcare and seeing doctor. So I'm a full-time clinician. I'm a medical doctor, and here I am talking to you about, what my views are on healthcare and medical AI. I'm the vice president of APARA, one of the organizers of this AIBotics event. I'm also the head of the Center for Research in Digital Therapeutics, Demand, the company's Demand in South Korea. So I actually deal with a lot of AI in medicine or healthcare setting quite often, in fact, nearly daily. So I'm happy to share some of what I have seen and heard and learned in the last couple of years working on AI projects with you today. So essentially, when we talk about AI, we talk about black boxes, and we talk about, black boxes as the very scary aspect in healthcare AI. But actually, who are the biggest AI in healthcare? What is the biggest black boxes in AI? It's actually us humans. We are the biggest black boxes that is dealing with the AI that we are trying to make them some sense of what's happening in the situation. So a lot of factors actually is involved in healthcare. We have different mentality, different diet, different priorities. In fact, we have different interpretation to similar wording or objects. A very typical example will be, let's say I say, what is a hot dog? So a hot dog is something we all know, we enjoy. And a group of people will say, hey, hot dog is the piece of frank, that is inside the bun. That piece of meat is the hot dog. Another group will tell me that, no, hot dog is the piece of frank, the piece of meat, and the bun, and the tomato sauce, the mayonnaise on top of it, that is a hot dog. So in fact, we are interpreting something black and white differently. We ourselves are the real black box, actually. Talking about human, every human has different, even mental capacities. I deal with mental capacities very often. I'm one of the assessors for mental capacity for deputyship, to apply deputyship in family justice courts. So different mental capacity for each people. Each people may have different capability of using the AI or interacting the AI. So how do we go about it? The typical example is the different needs and wants. Is the will to live, objectable, accessible data? I have no answer for that. So it's really quite interesting that, to me, in AI, the biggest black boxes are human beings. So what is the fear in the human factor engineering in AI? At least to the healthcare person, to us, we are training AI algorithms and validating them against the baseline data of our current performance. If, let's say, I can perform at that level, I generate the data at that level, and people recognize that as the gold standard, so they follow at that level. In future, people may not have the equal opportunity to train at my level because of my exposure. A lot of times they may be way late, supported by AI. And sometimes, the fear is that They might not get equal opportunities to be trained, to internalize some of these, different little factors that we look at before coming up with a management plan, before coming out with a diagnosis, before coming out with something that the patients, the family, and the physician can accept. So the erosion of some of these training opportunities is quite scary, to me. And of course, with this erosion, we are afraid of automation bias. So basically, we think that okay, this is the AI is now the gold standard. It's not a human. That can be very scary, right? Because now the humans are still the gold standard. The AI is just a supporting task that gives us an idea of what is happening, and save us time to understand some of these more routine data that we need to take, like heart rate, like oxygen saturation, and we can get the data quicker and make the decision faster or better. But in future, if let's say that the AI might be giving us a diagnosis quick and fast, and we look at that, we think, oh yeah, it's because the AI said so. Then would it be that the future physician may lack the confidence to diagnose that themselves in future? So this is to me a scary part. And of course, the example on automation bias is with the aviation um, sector. The pilots using autopilot, instead of flying the plane routinely, using all the knobs and controlling the plane physically. So that is something that we have to think about. Okay, so current situation, after I look across the board on the AIs that we have, the performance of the AI is still on a very, very narrow defined task. Like one of the previous speaker, Manish, talked about, my job is a doctor, and as a doctor, as a long-term care physician, I have many, many, many tasks. So AI itself actually can help me in certain very, very focused tasks. For example, looking at the retina picture and telling me that there is diabetic retinopathy, that's hypertensive retinopathy, then I know that, okay, we need to get the patient referred to an eye specialist to start some treatment. And a lot of these AI healthcare-based services are based on very independent surveys and trials. So we need more evidence for independence organization to try out the AI and to see whether it actually works. It's like medications. You go through all the trials, then after that you compare whether it works or not. And if it works, is it better than what we are originally have, or it is worse than what we originally have? And lastly, can AI understand its boundaries and its own limitations and hand over care? I think that is a very interesting question that in future where the AI is developed, is a bit more advanced, will they know when their limit is done and they need help, like a human being? So, of course, we are in healthcare, we are always aiming for zero errors. I mean, we are talking about human lives, we are talking about the human suffering. And like, for example, medication administration, in the nursing home, we taught the nurses, the nursing aide, the 5 R's. You must have the right patient. How do you know the right patient? Then we argue about how many factors to check. Whether you check the name, the NRIC number, the date of birth, the address, or you just check 2 of the 4 things. The right medication, obviously, the right dosage, the right timing, and the right route. I mean, you don't want to give something that's supposed to be, a suppository into, anywhere else, basically. So these are very important things that we do checks to aim for zero errors. So for AI, what should we do with that? Is there any checks? Definitely, we must be doing some checks. With any role of AI in the healthcare, we should have a safety controlling system framework. I mean, if you're rolling out this AI today and there's no such framework, you might want to rethink whether you should be instituting this safety controlling system framework. And of course, inside this framework, you have to have multi-attribute value model approach, MAVT, which comprises of extracting the attribute, generating the weight for the attribute, developing a rating scale, and finalize the system. So I'll elaborate on this in our next slide. So AI safety in healthcare. What do we think about AI safety? We, of course, in healthcare, we want to be able to understand how the AI model reaches its decisions, the white box AI, based on decision trees that we can follow through, okay, because of this, that. And of course, there is a lot of black boxes, deep neural network, models that is quite difficult to explain, but have proven maybe more accurate, more useful than just mainly on decision trees. So, but if you tell the healthcare person that, okay, I don't know how this idea, this diagnosis has arrived, then it's not very reassuring to the patient and to the physician using it. So how are we going to open up this black box? Sometimes the logic behind the AI decision-making model must be identified. What are the logic instead of the decision? This is form of a decision tree, but in the decision trees, these are the logics. And the specific model task must be able to be paused or modified as necessary. Each of these logic we can take out, we can modify if it's not doing well. And of course, in future, doctors needs to be trained, how to use the AI. They may not be trained as AI engineers, but they need to be trained. How does this AI work? When can you use it optimally? And what is a scenario that you might not be too confident in using AI? So empirical use of AIs, some people may argue, because as GPs, as doctors, we always do what we call empirical treatment. We will treat based on what it is commonly happening, and it's the proper cause of it, and then you see whether you get better after that. So can that be the case of empirical use of AI? Your gut feeling. I have no answer to that, and it's based on how the AI has been created and how much confidence we have in the creation of this AI. So safe controlling system, what constitutes a safe controlling system? It is a set of policy, practices, procedures, strategies, roles, functions, and resources associated with safety that interacts in an organized way to decrease the damage generated in process. Is there any example in clinical medicine now? Of course there is. In every department, we have mobility and mortality rounds every week, every month. CT head rounds, for example. And we sit down and discuss over each patient. For us, what is the most important? It's the outcome of the patient. So when the outcome is death, does it mean that something is wrong? Did we fail? Did we not do anything, to prevent that? Or mobility, did we fail? Did we not do anything to prevent that? How can we better support? Or is it, is it like the natural way? You can't do anything about it. So in medicine, there are three things, three processes that we are always taught. Those that can be treated, those that cannot be treated, but we always comfort, and those without treating, they will heal by themselves anyway. So in this example of mobility and mortality, we do want to, understand more of our current processes and look at the outcome and see whether there will be a potentially better outcome. And that is practiced in all the hospitals. So I guess AI can be the same. So this is an example of a safe controlling system, and it's very small, but you can see that there is safety policy, there are incentive for clinician to flag out any unsafe processes that they feel. There's a clinician and patient training, communication interaction, planning of action and control of actions. So I'll give you a few examples. Control of action, for example, we want to check the effectiveness of AI. So we want to prove for ourselves that the AI works. I'm actually involved in one such project that's looking at AI versus human practitioner and see, whether we can pack the AI that's been telling us is accurate to real life practice, whether it is accurate. So that's important. You might want to do a study on all the AI they're using to see whether they do what they say they do, because you are using it in a different environment than what the AI has been taught in the first place. So against existing gold standards, devices or programs. That's one. Licensing, of course, we are looking at now software as a medical device licensing category by the FDA, digital health as a software pre-certification program and all these things, all the liabilities, and all the continuous development, because AI is not, this is the finished product. It is going to continually evolve. And of course, due to false confidence, clinician may accept the results. So henceforth, what I said, there's an incentive for clinicians to do a rounds. Every month, we look at the outcome. Because in healthcare, we look at outcome. We want to look at the outcome in whether it makes sense to use this AI. Is the AI helping us? That's very important. Okay, and basically, training is important. We need to know the pros and cons. We need to know the side effect. The patient also need to know that, maybe the AI is not accurate in the certain, out of the mean curve, for example, And of course, looking at each individual section, we actually go through the 4 stages that I have mentioned previously, the multi-attributor value approach, and we can actually ascertain whether, we can continue to use the AI. I think that is all. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tan. You have just heard the importance of human factors in medical AI. Join us for the closing panel discussion that